James chapter 1, verse 1. James, a slave of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes who are in the dispersion, greetings. Consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith brings about perseverance. And let perseverance have its perfect work, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Let's stop there for that. Okay. And I'm sure you guys know all this, but let's just kind of go over things. The beginning of the first intro is James. And so, who is this guy James? What is old Jim got to do with anything?
He's the half-brother of Jesus.
That's the seems to be the consensus all around. There were other people that kind of bandied other names around, but really every commentator ultimately comes back to the half-brother of Jesus.
Yeah, the other famous James and John.
Sons of Zebedee, James and John.
He was killed.
Yep. Before this. Before this letter. So it's like, okay, strike his name out, right? And James was a very common name. Jacob is Jekos or something like that. Was the actual name of this. I don't know why they didn't call him Jacob, but it's a very common name.
I was going to ask, how did they come to that conclusion? But
well, they start by a process of elimination. So they assumed that it would be referenced in other places in the Bible, that the name James would be referred to. And there are James in many other places related in the Bible. There was some other James that they kind of just knocked out, but ultimately the half-brother. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but Mary had babies beyond Jesus, and that's why we call it half-brother, right?
I thought she might have been remarried or something.
Yeah, nope.
Well,
Okay.
it's
Stepbrother or
it's
something.
a half-brother because Jesus
His dad was.
was God.
Okay.
Right, exactly. Right. A different dad, right? And that's the way that works out.
Thank you for that.
Right, exactly.
That's it.
So his brothers, we have James. He also has Joseph and Simon and Jude that are listed there, and then 2 sisters unnamed. That's right. So it's a big family with it. And I could just imagine living with your older brother who thinks he's God. Oh yeah, he is. Oops.
I had a sister like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the older siblings seem to, yeah. Anyways, moving on from that point there. Okay, so most commentators I've seen have marked it as James. Obviously, he was well enough known, at least by himself, that he didn't need to articulate any further of who he was with it. And his only identity is what? Is the next phrase. Is a slave of God or a bondservant.
He became like the main leader
Oh, yeah.
of the Jerusalem church.
That's right, exactly. As a matter of fact, he was in the council, the very first council, when the Gentiles were being saved, and basically the question of, well, how are we going to deal with these guys? He was in the lead of that. So, and if you think about James in his life, or just hypothesize, he saw what Jesus did up close and personal, and he was not a believer with that. It's my understanding from other commentators, none of his brothers and sisters thought that he really was the Son of God, not until after the resurrection. And,
did his brother Jude write the book of Jude?
yes, as I understand it, his name was Judas, Judas, not Iscariot. It's really kind of funny because every time they say Judas in the Bible, they'll say Judas, not Iscariot. So his last name must be not Iscariot.
Yeah.
Just kind of strange there. Another random thought about James. What is James' last name? It's not Christ,
No.
right? So when we say Jesus Christ, often people use Christ as like his full name.
Mr. Christ, yeah.
Right, exactly, but it's not. So there's not Joseph Christ and Simon Christ and on and on and on. So I just thought that was kind of a humorous thought about that. A bondservant is a slave. I think you guys might have bondservant. Mine has slave in that. And of the Lord Jesus Christ. Why do you think he would clarify who he is by identifying as a bondservant or as a slave?
Seems familiar greeting of Paul, when Paul writes his letters at the beginning.
Very similar, but there's a significant difference. I'm glad you pointed that out. In almost all of Paul's writings, when he identifies himself, he'll say an apostle, a bondservant of Christ is what he'll do. He'll add that into it. And even others will talk, when they will identify where their position was, and then the bondservant on it. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm getting, sorry, I'm talking about rabbit trails. The definition of apostle, we had talked about it was someone who was around physically with Christ, right, and a follower. And if he would have claimed to be a follower of Christ during Christ's time on earth, drawn by James, he could use the word apostle. We'd use the apostle of the 12 disciples, if you will, plus Paul, in many ways. But wasn't it the apostle was you were, like you could be a follower and devoted follower of Christ today, but you couldn't be an apostle because you weren't here when he was physically. I heard that tie made.
Yeah, I think the clarification might be is an apostle is one who was under the teaching of that person more specifically, not just around. Because remember, he had crowds that followed him.
Well, that's my point. Yeah,
there were not 200 apostles.
But I wondered if James could have claimed to be an
I do
apostle.
think so. I think it would be a legitimate claim, and I wouldn't have any argument as if Howard's a standard.
Also, the word
Talk,
apostle
brother,
means
apostle.
sent one.
Say again, I'm sorry.
The word apostle also means sent one.
A sent one, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, all the disciples went out proclaiming the gospel. We know from tradition that they went out throughout the world. Paul's mission was to go to be a
He was
disciple.
sent out,
Yeah,
yeah.
to be.
But when was the first, really getting on the rabbit trail, when was the first word apostle used? Was it used back in the day?
I would think so.
It was a
Yeah.
common term.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anytime a herald or a king, that's why we see reference to that. Anytime a king would go, or it was a common term back then. Anytime you would send a message to one place to another place.
So does that mean that technically we are all apostles? Because aren't we sent out?
We're commanded to be
We're commanded to be sent out, right? To send out the message of the gospel of it,
Yeah,
right?
there's an argument about is there a title for does apostleship still exist today? We see that, and people still call themselves, I'm an apostle.
Yeah.
In certain denominations, and the question is, was there an office? Was there a tradition of an office held that we would consider? Well, maybe that has ended. It's a good debate.
Yeah, and you talk about the office. I mean, they talk about they do identify in the Bible the office of pastor, deacons.
It only
Elders.
identifies those two offices, and I think most people, I know I do, would decide that there are no apostles today, even though some of the more charismatic Pentecostal type, or sometimes you'll see a church that's called apostolic, right? And so they still hold to that there's still apostles today in the same form of these that were in the early church. But, there's a lot of, there's room for both viewpoints, but I tend to err on the side of that office was ceased with the original.
And whether it was even an office, I don't even know if I
At the
could
time, I don't know
classify
if
it.
office is the right word, but
Yeah.
That's
the
what we're
role.
looking at.
Yeah, yeah, so, one of those disputable matters that we got to create.
That makes no difference.
A difference with no distinction or something like that, right? Okay. I thought we'd get a lot faster past James. Did we really answer my question about why he wanted to identify himself as a bondservant and of the Lord Jesus Christ? Why would he want to do that? Why would any of them do that? Why?
Is he considered royalty because he knows Christ, he's a brother of Christ? Does that give him favor? Does that,
I don't know.
He doesn't mention that, but
yeah,
he doesn't pull that card out.
they know it. But he's a bondservant, kind of creates a different outlook.
I would think the reason he would say that is because he really wasn't that close a follower of Jesus until his death. And now he's writing a book. It's like, well, who are you to write a book? I mean, I don't think you really followed him that close while he was walking around, but apparently at some point he now considers himself a servant. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he did follow him.
Not until after his resurrection.
Until after the resurrection.
Okay.
If we went back into Acts and started studying Acts from the point of James, we would see where he gets convinced. And Jesus actually calls him out in the list of people to bring and to tell. And he says, and James, my brother. So he does pull that
I
out.
would think that's why he's making that distinction, because he didn't follow him while he was alive. He's got to say,
Yeah.
but yeah,
That
now
makes sense.
I'm a believer.
Okay, okay.
Not just a believer, but a servant.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And I started to say, but I've kind of corrected myself. In some books, they say, especially Paul, he says, I'm an apostle of Christ. These are the words of Christ. This is the message from Christ. He doesn't say that here. He just says he's a bondservant.
Right.
So he doesn't preface this by saying the following was inspired by God, or this is the word of God, or this is a message from God. This is not a prophecy. So I'm kind of backing out of what my first thought. I think he's just saying, I'm a bondservant of Christ. It kind of set the tone that this is a religious note. This isn't just, hey, how's your crops this year?
I'm on your level, kind of thing.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
up here. I'm up.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I'm
that's a
not
good
just
point.
telling stories just because I was his half brother. I'm telling stories because I'm a servant.
Okay. He gets into, in the second part of verse 1, to the 12 tribes who are in the dispersion, and then he says, greetings. So, to them, hi y'all. That's pretty much it.
But that's kind of interesting to me. I know I'm dominating here, but to me, when you write a letter, you're writing it to an individual or maybe a group, specific group, like in your family or your church. At least read it out to the church. To the 12 tribes of Israel, that's like saying, any American citizen.
Everybody.
Does
in
anybody
today's
have
society.
the word tribe?
Yes.
Well, it says to the 12 tribes.
Tribes, okay.
Yeah, mine does.
So it's this is well before internet and all this other stuff. So who is he going to send it to? It's kind of, who do you
So do
give
you,
it to a message like that?
It's probably not going to, intended to go to all those circulate. You've heard of like that some of these letters
Yeah.
being circular, and as I understand, these were believers, Jewish believers, Jewish converts,
right,
Christians
Jewish Christians.
that now have been dispersed all up into around Galatia in that area.
That's right.
I mean, we know from the time period that things had happened to the Christians that were originally, we see in Acts that when, Peter preaches, we see 5,000, 3,000 And where do those people go to? Well, once persecution, because we know that happens, they gotta go somewhere, besides jail. I mean,
Right.
not everyone's gonna wait, get thrown in jail, so.
There are some commentators that talk about this dispersion referring to earlier in time, when they were held captive and went to Babylon and to other locations and stuff
I think
like
it's
that.
both.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of it's like a play on words
Mhm.
that James uses all the time about talking about all of Israel and how you were dispersed, but also to those that were recently dispersed by Herod, King Agrippa, who started the persecution. I mean, an overt persecution, by the way, Paul included
Yeah.
in all of that, in the dispersion.
Even today you hear, how do you say it, diaspora?
Diaspora, yes, that's the
And-
word for
and-
that.
And so, are you talking about those that got dispersed back at the time of Babylon, or even the Northern
Right.
Kingdom?
Right.
Even 200 years earlier,
Right.
the Assyrians, or are you talking
Yeah,
about this?
exactly. How
I
many,
think
which-
the answer is yes.
right, exactly,
It's
Yeah.
the Jewish dispersion.
right. So that's who so that's sort of who he's talking to, okay?
If you think, I think because the next verse too he's talking about trials and maturity.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he's talking to those who were persecuted
Yeah.
and are under trials and are dispersed because of that.
Right, and I do think, I get a sense, I don't know if you guys do, he's talking about the here and now, and not history, right?
Right.
You kind of get that sense that he's talking about those who are going to actually read my letter, right?
How does this letter play in, because it's not in order, I mean, that's following Hebrews, but, I mean, is it right after Acts, or is it the time?
Time-wise, yes, it's after Acts, but before Romans in time.
Well, yeah, I mean, Acts is a broad.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's why I was
It's like-
hesitant, because it's huge history. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like in the
Luke
middle of
takes a
Acts,
swath of
maybe is a
history.
better way of
This
saying
letter
that.
is-
Yeah. So we think that probably most scholars would say it probably happens before the Jerusalem Council, or roughly around that time. But so from the time that Paul starts persecuted, the church gets persecuted from Paul and all the Jewish leaders, and James gets martyred, all the way until probably the council,
Right,
somewhere around there.
yeah. Okay.
Maybe a little after, how much?
He says greetings. It's just real short, just, hey, just in the letter. That would be a Hallmark card. That's what that'd be. Verse 2, consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials. What a masochist. Why would you consider it joy when you encounter these things? And does that imply how sad you are if you don't have any trials and tribulations? Is that what that is implying?
No, I think he's just trying to say, always keep your eye on the big picture, not what's right in front of you.
Okay.
So my footnote says a trial is a divinely ordained difficulty that God either causes or permits so that he may grow us, conform us into the image of his son.
Okay.
So it's a good thing. It should be viewed as a good thing, even though it hurts, I guess.
I heard two different people recently that are like noted Christian speakers, and they said of all the questions they, looking back through the decades of all the campuses they've spoken on, all the churches, the most common question they get asked is about going through suffering. That's the most common.
Right.
It outranks all the other questions by a wide margin, why do people go through suffering. And if you remember, even C.S. Lewis had a real, I think it was called The Problem of Pain or something like that he wrote, and it was talking about how God works during those times, kind of like a footnote he Dave read. And so, it's puzzling to us, but somehow, I think your footnote said ordained or,
Divinely ordained.
divinely ordained. Somehow God works through those times, and those are used to build steadfastness and perseverance, etc. through faith, even if we don't understand it.
And so the statement that James is making here, consider joy, implies after the trials, not consider it joy before your trials. In other words, you're not looking forward to the pain and suffering, but rather after that has happened, consider that joyful.
Mine says whenever you experience various
Right.
trials. So
Or while you're in the
during-
middle of it, right.
So think of, if you go to the gym and you want to get built up and you're pumping weights and
I
stuff,
have no idea what you're
you
talking
get
about.
pain, or at least sometime the next day
Burn.
you'll have pain. It's self-inflicted, so we don't question it because we do it to ourselves. But it's, most guys like it enough or are joyful enough to keep going and doing
Do it
it because they
again,
want to
yeah.
reach a point where, their goal.
Yeah.
And when God ordains it or allows it, we don't necessarily want to go through it because we didn't choose it ourselves, is the way I see it.
Okay,
Well, Paul was happy while he was in prison.
That's right.
true. I guess we should talk about that word. You just used the word happy. The difference between joy and happy.
Well, we generally consider one to be an emotive and one to be a state. Where happiness in our culture today is an emotion of some sort, and joyfulness, we tend to conflate the two because
Yeah.
even the word blessed can be translated happy.
Yeah. So happy is that moment in time, whereas joy extends time. It doesn't matter. You can be having your leg amputated and still have joy. I know I'm just going
Right.
crazy there.
Even though you may not be happy about
That
it.
you may not be happy about it, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. I mean, some of the early Greek philosophers used that word happiness as one of the important things in life was to find that happiness.
right.
And so it has to do more with virtues, at least in some of the original Greeks. So.
Okay, so in this other phrase here, when you encounter various trials, I don't know why my brain went to trials and temptations. I've heard that phrase tons of time.
Same word.
What really is the difference between a trial and a temptation? If we've identified that trial is from God, that's what we kind of gleaned off of that commentary that David just read. So where is temptations?
Well, verse 3 says, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. So it's a test.
That's a test. So
Temptation is a test.
what is the temptation?
Same thing.
Is it?
It is. It's the same word. It's the same Greek word. It's just a matter of okay.
Maybe I'll drive it home this way.
Yeah. Yeah. Temptation, test,
who's
trial.
doing what?
Erasmus.
Who's doing the testing and who's doing the tempting?
Well, we say God never tempts, so.
I'm sorry, don't
We
speak.
say God never tempts, so
Yeah,
so we gotta.
yeah. We'll circle on that in just a second here, because
But a temptation is, to answer your question, I think, a temptation, I'll go to Jay for the temptation. I'm tempting you, and it's your choice to go left or right, or to take it or not take it, or whatever the temptation is. So it's laid out in front of you, but you have to make the decision. Where a trial potentially could be the leg is amputated, it happened to you, it's just not what you had planned or you had thought would be your happy existence. But a temptation is your choice. Well, the result of the temptation is you have to make a choice in some way.
To go back to the footnote, it says, divinely ordained difficulty that God causes, which wouldn't be the temptation, it might be the trial, or permits,
And that's the temptation, is the
the
permits.
permits.
And that becomes the trial,
Because he
is that-
allowed
right.
Jesus to be tempted, right?
right? Or you go back to Job,
Right.
example after example.
Well,
Right, yeah, yeah.
I would say trials, to me, that means any adversity, whether it was God that gave you that adversity or just the world that heaped that upon you. So I was kind of struggling with what it meant by ordained by God, because I think we endure a lot of adversity that, God
Self-inflicted.
didn't give us cancer, he's allowing it to happen, but he didn't make us sick.
You're right.
Yeah,
He might remove it, and then again, he might let you go through it.
right.
And it may not even be about you, it may be about
Yeah,
something
that's
that's
right.
someone else.
Something
A
else.
family member or whatever, yeah. Yeah. In 3, he talks about knowing that the testing of your faith brings about this thing called perseverance.
Endurance is what.
Yeah, mine's perseverance, endurance, it's
Steadfast.
steadfastness is another common word used there. Who's doing the knowing in verse 3? Count it all joy, knowing.
Oh, you know is what he.
Mine says
Yeah.
because you know.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Just to make sure that it's, because God already knows what's going to happen, right? So this is for your knowledge and understanding here. That testing of the faith brings about this steadfastness. The word that is used there, that steadfastness or endurance, is actually a racing term. And it talks about running the race, and we see that all the time. And you'll start to see that idea about running this competition, this race that goes on. And I don't think necessarily, we're going to run out of time on this one, that it's a race of others. In other words, who's going to win in the perseverance race? But it's an individual race. It's kind of like if you're on the golf course all by yourself, do you still win if there's nobody there to play? Do you cheat? Sorry, I just went off on there. Sorry. Sorry, this is going to scoot that one. So remember that this endurance is an individual thing, not a wide thing. You're not trying to be a better Christian than the next Christian, but it's a one-on-one type of thing. And we have to stop here because of time. Okay, what are you guys praying for?